I think they did a really great job at addressing the puck.
But they still picked the puck into many of these heroes, right?
I mean, the puck was picked quite early.
Oh, puck, oh, right, it was the
It was
pick.
Wyvern Monkey, and then they came up with 3 heroes that, you know, and I think it was the right way to go about it.
Yep.
Honestly, I feel like Secret did a great job at drafting, but so did Team Spirit, and to me, it says something about why these teams are still, you know, are the kind of last man standing, because I think they're the best drafting teams, or they have developed into becoming the best drafting teams of the tournament.
This was an outplay. This wasn't an outdraft, in my opinion. There were very even drafts that could have really gone either way.
How do you learn these concepts? As you were the drafter for OG as well, and also coached beforehand, like, do these concepts come with experience? Is there anyone that you've talked to that helped you with draft theory, quote unquote, or what's the idea behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you learn them over the years, I would say. For instance, Team Spirit, they might be looked at being a young team, but they have a coach, you know, Silent, former teammate of mine, that he's been around forever. And maybe he doesn't get as much credit because he's not as known, and he's more of a quiet kind of person, but he is extremely smart about the game, and he's seen so much that he would find the answers. Obviously, it also comes from the players, but you need to emphasize a lot on drafting. Drafting has huge impact, especially when you get players of that caliber. All 10 players in that game can execute. You know, there's no such thing as, oh, this guy is a little bit worse than the others. That's done. So it's going to come down to the draft, the understanding of it, the strategy, and it has a massive impact. And I think that's also the beauty of Dota. The game is so complex that you have to give this a lot of attention, an immense amount of attention.
As we see these highlights brought to you by Aramco, I want to follow this up. Danok, do you feel like drafting in general has become more refined as an art over the years?
I think so. I think a lot of teams aren't really letting those big gotcha picks be as much of a factor anymore. I think there's a lot of knowledge about Dota. Whenever I'm casting, for example, I always go down a checklist of, like, do they have this? Do they have multiple avenues to be able to do this?
Yeah, Winter does that too.
Yeah, so they've, like, if one hero is locked down, do you have a secondary out? That's the way I go about it, but I know a lot of teams just draft against each other. Don't actually play the games, they just draft against each other, and then of course they've got that great level of understanding that they're going to be able to say, okay, we won this draft because of X, Y, and Z. So not only does it get you into the mindset of, okay, how are we going to outwit our opponents, but also, like, what is actually good about this draft and what's going to enable it to be the most effective it can be.
As we see the scoreboard brought to you by STC, I want to once again ask you, Seb, when we used to talk about tournaments, right? We used to talk about tournament meta, the meta would set in a specific tournament, it'd be different from the meta that was up until now. Is it true that now we're starting to see that metas just develop in single best of threes? Like, teams are so versatile and they're so diverse that they're actually adapting to each other within the same series?
No, definitely. It is. It's a real thing, and it happens 100%. And I think that what's been also shown is that there's been a little bit of a switch, maybe more emphasis, and it kind of always happens in these big tournaments, like more emphasis being put on the overall synergy of the lineup and how it deals with the opposing lineup, as opposed to kind of using things such as the laning phase or a mid matchup, because now you end up with players that are so aware of, you know, the teams that, you know, the heroes they're going to go up against, and ways to kind of damage control what could be an unfavorable situation, that it doesn't do the job anymore. You need to understand that, I mean, you play versus Spirit, you play versus Secret, you play versus LGD, there's no such thing as stumping them in 10 minutes, you know? They will find a way to have a stable game, and then you're going to have to worry about what happens next. How do we get into the mid game? And I feel like, you know, LGD, they've done that. Team Spirit, they've done that. They don't have these lineups that are all in kind of lineups. And Secret have tried to adapt to that as they went to the game 2 and then the game 3 unsuccessfully. And, you know, as Danok said, I quite much agree. I don't think it was a drafting issue. I think it was more of an execution issue in game 3 especially. I mean, that bottom lane, it should not have went that poorly for Secret.
Yeah, I think Rezo did a great job in the top lane as well. We saw on the scoreboard, he did end up like 1 kill, 8 deaths, sure, but he did his job. He bullied the Monkey King out of the lane. He was creating a ton of space, and then of course you have that potential to be able to go in onto someone like Toronto Tokyo, use the Doom to try and kill him, but it just never got to that stage. It was honestly the bottom lane and even mid. I feel like Toronto Tokyo outplayed Misha as well.
That's actually an opportunity for me to get a message across. You know, MMR is just a number. KDA is also just a number. And I really want to emphasize on that. I mean, I'll give you an example. You're losing a game. Somebody's actually trying to win. You know, he's going to go in and fight, buy back and fight. That's 2 deaths. And then you have the Shadow Amulet player on the other side of the map. He's not dying. He's having a flawless KDA. So, you know, it might sound like a joke, but sometimes, you know, dying a lot means you're trying a lot. Right. Whereas, you know, playing a very safe game, being like, oh, I lost a tower, a second tower, they got roached. Well, you're not dying. You have a positive KDA, but you're literally griefing the game. So the KDA, when you have a really high KDA, obviously it means you had a really great game, high impact. The opposite is not true.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that point. I mean, famously, you knew players like, what is it, I'm Dying to Create Space, right? Paladai was known for that, for example. And he was regarded as one of the best fives back in the day, you know?
Course.
He would go 112 every single game, didn't matter.
It really means nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to emphasize on that. Like, literally nothing. And I think to maybe add a little bit on also Secret and their run, because of course, yeah, they're knocked out and, you know, it's bitter and everything, but at the same time, I think given the circumstances, they had an incredible showing and an incredible run.
Yeah.
Top 4, you have to be happy about that at any kind of lane.
Of course. Let's remember the run a little bit. We have brackets here to remind our viewers of short memory loss what happened the previous days. Here we go. So if you can see the playoff brackets, Secret along with OG were the 2 teams that made it directly through from the group stages into the semifinals, and they've both been knocked out. Perhaps, you know, that extra warm-up game, who knows, that actually helped out. PSG.LGD, Nigma Galaxy, Roll, Never Give Up, and Team Spirit were the 4 teams that made it through from group stages to the first stage, and Team Spirit and LGD won both matchups that they've played in. So they're coming in hot, they have momentum. That is always a factor. I always remember when I talked to the when the whole DPC format debacle was starting, and like how teams are getting directly to the playoffs of the major, right? And I talked to a couple of teams that got there, Thunder Awakened, for example, one of them, and they all told me, I actually wish I didn't get into playoffs directly. They all wanted to play group stages because they thought that was much better for them. They thought that actually improved their Dota. Do you resonate with that sentiment, Seb?
Definitely. I mean, I think skipping group stage is a mistake, as in like having a format where some teams are going to skip the group stage. I'm not a fan of it. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I hate it. You know? I think it's really bad for teams because then they don't get the experience of like playing against all these teams. You know, kind of learning. It's just taken away from them. It's like you know, having somebody warm up for a game and then the others are just like locked in a dark room. They don't get to see anything. They don't get to warm up. It's actually unfair. You know, in that case, all the teams here got to play the group stage. They got to play, you know, 8 games, which is a lot. There was 1 series left for the teams that dominated their groups. I don't know that it had that much impact, especially knowing that actually all the teams used that day to have practice games, scrims between teams that were already knocked out and that, you know, knew that
are still really solid teams as well.
So that is actually, it's not official games. If anything, it's even better because they get to try a lot of strategies, you know, experiment a little bit more instead of being put under the spotlight in a single elim bracket where you can't really maybe play around as much.
So it only shows the strength of PSG.LGD and Team Spirit then, doesn't it, Dano?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, they didn't get as long of a break. They had to just keep their nose to the grindstone and just keep pushing on through. Again, it's just the power of those great minds. Of course, Silent, like you said, underrepresented and underappreciated by a lot of people. And of course, Xiao Wei, he isn't underappreciated. Everyone knows how good of a coach he can be, but
that's why I mentioned him so much, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's going to come down to maybe it's that battle of wits rather than the execution, because both of these teams, they can just play at such a high level in the grand final.
Hopefully TrueSight can shed some light on what Silent does backstage, you know, what his impact. I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, and maybe then it would change the Western perception or just general Dota perception of who he is. I don't think there's a wrong perception. I think people just don't know him.
Exactly. I mean, it just comes because there's so many Dota youngins these days. You know, they come in TI7, TI8. They miss the days where Silent was considered one of the best carries that you've seen. Like his days with Roxkiss when he came by and he was actually...
He was incredible.
He was incredible, right? But it's always good to remind people not just what these coaches do, not what these people play and how well they are, but what they're playing for as well. Which is why we have... Oh, okay, we have an actual trophy shot. That was amazing. I thought we were going to pan out. This is the trophy they're playing for. And yes, to you it might look similar to the AR trophy, but this is the real one. And we've all touched it. So, sorry, production. We've all touched it, and it is actual real metal trophy. It feels really nice.
It's heavy.
It's heavy. We were kind of concerned about some players being able to carry it, but don't worry. We have Xiao8 and Silent will be the ones to lift it up.
It might even be heavier than the Aegis. It's that heavy.
Oh wow!
It is serious business.
Okay. Oh, that's only you can say that.
I can say it twice too.
Oh, was one heavier than the other?
No, they were the same.
They're the same. Okay.
Did you hear that, Toronto Tokyo? You can only say it once. Anyway, this trophy is what they're going to be playing for, and it's going to be a really, really exciting matchup. So let's talk about it a little bit, right, as we get ready for that and get ready for, of course, the players walking out on stage and everything. Dano, what do you think? So LGD has been the adaptable, the versatile team, right? They've found literally 5 strategies, I think, in this tournament. Team Spirit, they've stuck to their guns a little bit more, right? And their comfort is a bit stronger. What do you think LGD will try to do against Team Spirit to break their strategy?
Anything that they can do to disrupt Team Spirit's strong lanes, I think is going to go a long way to giving LGD the edge. I think, honestly, both teams are so good at teamfight that there's such little differences that are going to be able to make the changes there. It might be on the back of Maposhka getting a clear ward off that's not identified. It might be on the back of, you know, someone like Xinkyu just popping off in a team fight, you know, catching 3 heroes like he consistently does on heroes like his Tiny, his Earth Spirit. So it really could go either way. I can't make a prediction. I think it's going to be another series like the rest of the playoffs that goes the full 3 games.
I hope so. And we always want more Dota. Seb, do you think that Team Spirit, they've tried a little bit, right, to experiment with Secret, and they went for this, honestly, LGD draft. That's what it looked like to us. Do you feel like they're going to go back to they're going to stick to their guns this time? They're not going to try out different strategies as much against LGD?
Yeah, I mean, the difference between now and TI, I feel like at TI, Team Spirit, they were in the driving seat. They were the team that figured the meta the best. I feel LGD, they had some really strong strategies, but I think Team Spirit, they were super confident about what they were doing. You know, they had these Marses, these Magnuses, tried, you know, it revolved a lot around what Collapse plays, and they were super comfortable with it. And LGD, they had to really kind of scratch their heads on how do we get them out of that comfort zone, and they did not manage to do so. I feel like here it might actually be a little bit of the opposite. I feel like Team Spirit, at the beginning of the tournament, they were maybe even a little bit confused, and now they're starting to pick up some steam, understanding what works for them better, and it shows. But you know, for instance, in game 1, it was a big flop. Like, you could tell that this was a draft they really did not know how to execute or were really uncomfortable with, because they had a stable early game. You know, it was on them to kind of execute. Whereas I feel like LGD, that doesn't happen with them anymore throughout this tournament. They seem to me, I think LGD will be in the driving seat, you know, throwing stuff at Team Spirit, and I'm just looking at, you know, how well can Team Spirit match up against that.
Okay, well, we're going to have to see. The next series is upon us. We're going to take a rather large break, right? As you guys know, they're in the driving seat. We're going to press the brakes and come back with the next series of the day.